Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has traveled to Belarus to discuss the ongoing war in Ukraine. He met with the Belarus leader Alexander Lukashenko, who said the two nations have a single army. Shoigu also met his Minsk counterpart and signed an amended security deal. Russian forces have deployed from Belarus, but Belarus says its troops won't fight in Ukraine. And for more on this, let's talk now to our correspondent Nick Connolly in Kiev. Nick, Ukrainian officials have frequently expressed concern that Belarusian forces could cross the border into northern Ukraine. Will this meeting ease those fears?
Well, obviously, any sighting of top Russian officials there in Minsk is something that is followed very closely here from Kiev. I think for now, we haven't seen or heard anything that would really make people more worried, particularly here. Actually, in contrast, in kind of the opposite direction, we have seen Russia dialing down, pulling forces out of Belarus and taking them to the east of Ukraine because they've just been losing so many boots on the ground, losing so many soldiers in recent months. I think there's definitely a desire from the Russian side to get even more in the way of technical assistance. We've seen Belarus handing over lots of Soviet-era weaponry, doing lots of repairs on Russian weapons, and also training new Russian recruits. So that is definitely something that Alexander Lukashenko, I think, is willing to do. But as for something more serious, as for potential attack on the ground from Belarus, which is only 100 kilometers, air, kind of, as the crow flies from here in Kiev, I think we're not seeing any major development there yet. But definitely there's a desire on the part of Russia to keep that tension there and to kind of, force Ukraine to guard that border and, spend as many resources doing that as possible.
Right. I mean, Russian President Lukashenko has stressed again and again that Belarus will not enter the war in Ukraine. But in the long run, I mean, how long can he say no to Putin?
Well, I think there is a lot of speculation of how much space he still has to decide. I think for now we're seeing that all the kind of sociology, all the kind of polling, even kind of private polling, anonymous polling shows that there is no willingness among Belarusian society, no enthusiasm for this war, no willingness to send their own troops. But definitely, Belarus is open to Russian forces. They're sending missiles into Ukraine from Belarus. They're using Belarusian air bases. I think most of the experts you talk to will say that in the long run, Putin would probably have to push Lukashenko aside if he wants to use Belarus as the kind of jumping board for a full-scale invasion and to get Belarusian forces involved. For now, he's been doing very well at basically sitting on kind of both chairs at the same time, keeping his kind of some wiggle room for himself while doing enough to get money and other support from Moscow to keep his own population in check. And I think for now it looks like he's carrying on that fairly successfully.
And very briefly, Nick, because we also heard that French President Emmanuel Macron commented on possible negotiations between Russia and Ukraine and put so-called security guarantees into play. What more can you tell us?
For now, there's very little detail on that. I think there's a sense here in Kiev that, as always, Emmanuel Macron wants to play the kind of intermediary and kind of show more openness to Russia's demands than, say, the Americans or the Brits. And there's also a lot of worry that he is somehow willing to give them some kind of, play some kind of room to demand guarantees from Ukraine. In the past, that's been the demand that Ukraine wouldn't join NATO. I think that is off the table now. But there is a sense here that he is wanting to give Vladimir Putin a face-saving way out of this war, potentially at the cost to Ukraine's interests.
All right, Nick Connolly there reporting from Kiev. Thank you so much, Nick.